just saw that strange uncle say, "Asking for their help means paying money." Zhang Explode was stunned, and for a moment didn't know what to do. Xiao Yi, seeing the situation, quickly picked up a steamed bun and stuffed it into the third brother's mouth. Then he let Zhang Explode eat in peace, saying they would explain other matters after dinner. Gong Ling remained silent the whole time and left immediately after finishing breakfast, saying she wanted to go back to rest. Zhang Explode, feeling uneasy, started eating with hesitation. However, after just a few mouthfuls, the strange uncle then startled him once again, saying, "Zhang Explode just ate a total of 1 steamed bun, 3 eggs and a bowl of porridge. He has already written it down." As he spoke, he also patted his belly. Before Zhang Explode could react, he stood up directly and said he wanted to go out for a walk. Xiao Yi naturally saw through the third brother's thoughts. He immediately called out to wash the bowl himself. Unexpectedly, that guy, upon hearing this, instead ran faster than a rabbit. However, when he turned around, the usually aloof uncle also put down his chopsticks and said, "I'll leave it to you, Xiao Yi." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi respectfully agreed. But Zhang Explode did not expect that the aloof uncle would give him a meaningful look before leaving. Then he patted Zhang Explode on the shoulder, telling him to take his time and not rush. This feeling suddenly stirred an indescribable emotion in Zhang Explode's heart. As a result, only Xiao Yi and Zhang Explode were left at the table. Xiao Yi, still maintaining his friendly tone, gestured to Zhang Explode to eat more if he hadn't eaten enough, then quietly put on his headphones. Unexpectedly, as soon as the steamed bun entered his mouth, a strange sensation surged from his stomach. He thought about what he had vomited and thought about those monsters named Shang. Zhang Explode, who had just calmed down with great difficulty, asked with a solemn expression, "Are those things called Shang really what I threw up?" Xiao Yi smiled at his words and replied with just 2 words, "Yes, indeed." After confirming the matter, Zhang Explode seemed to have accepted this fact. At this moment, he wondered whether these monsters called Shang were hidden in his body or in his blood. But unexpectedly, Xiao Yi denied everything. He said those Shang creatures were right behind Zhang Explode. When he heard this, Zhang Explode was shocked. He quickly got up and looked behind him. But there was nothing there. Xiao Yi laughed out loud at the scene. He explained that when he said, "behind you," he didn't mean the physical back, but rather the opposite in reality. In other words, if what Zhang Explode sees in front of him is reality, then his back is connected to another world. And those Shang that Zhang Explode sees are running out from that world. Therefore, Zhang Explode's body is a gateway between 2 worlds. After hearing these words, Zhang Explode finally understood what a Shangman was. Then he panicked. He didn't understand why fate had to be so cruel to him, why he was chosen to bear all this. But Xiao Yi still had that smiling expression. He told Zhang Explode that it was his natural disposition. When these words came out, Zhang Explode was stunned. He seemed somewhat incredulous. And Xiao Yi continued to explain calmly. He said that Shangman's birth was random, without any cause or effect. In other words, Zhang Explode was the chosen one, but even though they were specializing in dealing with Shang and Shangman, they did not fully understand the birth principle of Shangman. They only knew that when a person became Shangman, they would inevitably go through a process called Shang Ascension. And this process necessarily involves death. In other words, Zhang Explode has already died once. It's just strange that the current Zhang Explode is in a very bizarre state, that is, he is both a Shangman and a human. Because Xiao Yi has never seen anyone recover from the Shangman state. In this view, Zhang Explode is once again a lucky guy, or you could say he is still a miracle. However, Xiao Yi clearly has not finished speaking. He continued to explain. In normal circumstances, once a person completes Shang Ascension, they will completely lose their humanity and become a walking corpse, constantly releasing monsters. The way to deal with this is to cut off the heads of these Shangmen and bury them, just like What is happening in this room? This room? Zhang Explode suddenly shuddered. He looked at the densely packed jars, and couldn't help but feel a chill down his spine. But how could he have imagined that just as Xiao Yi was explaining the way to eliminate Shangmen? Next door, the same drama was unfolding. This was a room filled with medicine cabinets, and the floor was marked with formations. The aloof uncle stood in front of a table covered in white cloth, and on that table lay the Shangman boy that Xiao Yi brought back. As for Xiao Yi, he seemed to be cooperating with the uncle, explaining in detail every step after the extraction. That means after the extraction, the bronze needle lock, 7 orifices sealing, needs to be used. After that, it can be immersed in a sticky rice jar, and a talisman can be pasted to seal the jar. However, even after Xiao Yi finished speaking, Zhang Explode was still in shock. Because he couldn't believe that there were so many jars here. Doesn't this mean that there are many Shangmen like this in the world? Xiao Yi smiled and said, "Don't just focus on the quantity. In fact, all these were saved up by several generations of Chu Wu. Some of these jars have probably been stored for hundreds of years." But even though Xiao Yi explained it that way, Zhang Explode still felt lingering fear, because in that jar, he seemed to see his own future. So he asked Xiao Yi with some concern if he himself would eventually transform entirely into Shangmen. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi suddenly smirked, although he was not sure whether Zhang Explode would completely ascend. But as long as Zhang Explode will inexplicably vomit blood, that means he has the potential for that kind of change. But rather than worrying about the unknown, it's better for him to seize the opportunity to eat more sticky rice while it's hot to dispel his worries. The moment he heard this, Zhang Explode instantly transformed into a hardcore eater. At this moment, he is unwilling to waste even a single grain of sticky rice. He even asked questions while eating. "Eating glutinous rice, will I be able to eliminate Shang Ascension?" But unfortunately things didn't go as planned because Xiao Yi didn't know either. Zhang Explode is in a panic again. He really wants to know how he should go about to become a normal person completely. In fact, Xiao Yi and the others are even more eager to know about this. Or you could say any Chu Wu would want to know. Just then, Xiao Yi heard a voice on the other end of the phone call, and Zhang Explode, who is sensible, remained silent. The voice belonged to the aloof uncle. He asked Xiao Yi to inquire whether there are any special items in the room where the coffin was placed at that time. "Anything else?" Zhang Explode was surprised. Wasn't this asked before? He already mentioned there were many dead people. There is also a red coffin and a boy. Oh, and there are many blood footprints. But what the uncle cares about is not these, but letting him continue to recall. "Is there more?" Zhang Explode was a little puzzled as he carefully recalled the scene at that time. Gradually, he remembered that when he walked into that room, he saw many gold bricks. Upon hearing this, the uncle did not ask any more questions, because on the table in front of him were several broken pieces of gold bars. And these were exactly what he took out from the child's abdomen. So who exactly sewed these gold bars inside? Meanwhile, the gang boss, who was beaten up by Xiao Yi, finally escaped in a sorry state back to the warehouse. As soon as he entered, he loudly ordered his subordinates to bring him some water and medicine. However, after yelling for half a day, none of his subordinates came to help. This made him very angry. Where did those damn guys go? However, just at that moment, a faint voice suddenly came from the side. I saw a strange figure with a painted face leaning on the sofa, sewing something in hand. Interestingly, on the strange figure's head was also a golden needle, and even his body was covered in marks of needle and thread. I heard him questioning Black about the delayed delivery, and why there was only an empty coffin left in the goods shipped back. To my surprise, the Black boss was not afraid at all. He replied disdainfully, "What? I can't stop selling if I want to." Upon hearing this, the weird man with the flower face seemed visibly displeased. He mentioned that he had already paid a deposit, emphasizing the importance of honesty in doing business. But the boss clearly did not regard him highly. Honesty had no value in his eyes. He shouted directly inside, asking his men to come out and chop off the impolite idiot on the spot. However, the entire warehouse remained quiet, and the jester even sneered at him, mocking him to speak louder, lest his own brothers couldn't hear him. Gold, this relatively rare and precious metal, has now been sewn into the navel of a boy. The navel, which is considered the basis of the 12 meridians, and the source of the 5 viscera and 6 bowels for humans. What could be the meaning of sewing gold in this location? As a contemporary Chu Wu big brother, the aloof uncle is somewhat perplexed. He doesn't understand what these predecessors from 300 years ago were trying to achieve. And this anomaly naturally brought Xiaoyi over. He was holding a piece of gold and looking at it carefully. Although he seemed to have sensed something, he remained silent. Episode 11. Start working. However, Xiaoyi ran to the next room. He naturally couldn't leave Zhang Explode alone. So, as before, he once again called the third brother. So, a familiar scene unfolded, and Zhang Explode felt so awkward that it seemed like his toes were trying to dig an escape tunnel. Fortunately, this strange atmosphere did not last long because Xiaoyi and the others had already come out from the inner room. However, at this moment, the aloof man was holding a jar in his hand, creating a somewhat tense atmosphere. Zhang Explode couldn't help but feel nervous. In the end, he couldn't help but ask, "What's in the jar?" But no one responded to him. Because although Zhang Explode asked the question, the answer seems to be already obvious. After understanding this, Zhang Explode also fell silent. He looked at the jar, as if he was looking at himself. Xiaoyi patted the stunned Zhang Explode, and said that the boy who might lead him to the amusement park could be this one. Because that place is where the boy was once buried, and before they met, the boy had been sealed in a coffin for over 300 years. So, Zhang Explode's appearance was like a long-awaited relief for him. Upon saying this, Xiaoyi suddenly shouted and told Zhang Explode to get ready to take him out for some fresh air. Zhang Explode subconsciously followed along because his heart was already in chaos, and he indeed needed to release some tension. But at this moment, an arm was draped over his shoulder. Looking at the muscular Uncle Zhang Explode, who owned the Backbreaker 3000, he woke up abruptly. Perhaps, at this moment, he no longer needed to relax. Sure enough, the expected strange atmosphere has arrived. I saw the Backbreaker 3000 placed next to Zhang Explode's ear, making a gesture as if whispering something secretly. Then, the creepy warm breath came close to the ear. And that strange uncle said something that really caught his attention. So when Zhang Explode just walked out the door, then the strange uncle cleared his throat to announce something. That is, from today onwards, this Li Explode is his apprentice. Zhang Explode was speechless. He had clearly told him his name at least twice. "Are you going to bow down and pay your respects to your master?" With a strange uncle's reminder, he immediately woke up. Zhang Explode didn't care anymore whether the name was right or not, and he immediately bowed respectfully to accept the apprenticeship. So from that moment on, he had an inexpensive master. And the first thing after bowing to his master was to have the master take the disciple to visit the main courtyard of the sect. As for Xiaoyi, who originally planned to take Zhang Explode out to relax, he was also completely baffled by this sudden turn of events. At this moment, Master brought Zhang Explode to an elegant courtyard and pointed at the surrounding houses, asking him what he thought, and which one he planned to buy. Zhang Explode was once again confused when he heard this. He wondered if Master had forgotten something. Thinking quickly, he explained that he was not here to buy a house. To his surprise, Master furrowed his brows and asked, "Then why are you here looking for me?" Could it be that this master couldn't even remember something for 3 minutes? Feeling speechless, Zhang Explode quickly revealed the secret conversation they had before. The condition to restore himself to normal was to become the master's disciple. Fortunately, the master should not have forgotten about this matter. After a moment of contemplation, he suddenly said in a serious tone. Zhang Explode's current physique is very attractive to Shang. So, those Shang who wander in the outside world will gradually gather around Zhang Explode, thereby influencing the people around him. And this is also the reason why Zhang Explode has become a disaster star. Therefore, his first step in wanting to become a normal person is to stop Shang from getting close. As soon as he heard this confident explanation, Zhang's eyes lit up. He asked his master with a look of surprise, "How exactly can all of this be done?" Then he saw his master pulling out a mask of ancient coins. Upon seeing this object, he immediately remembered that when he was tied up here before, it seemed like he had worn this thing. The master explained that this thing is called a 5-emperor coin mask, which can ward off evil spirits. Wearing this item will not only deter evil things from approaching, but also help prevent Zhang from spitting blood. In addition, there is another crucial point, which is, it looks very handsome when worn. Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode already adores the master endlessly. This mask seems tailor-made for oneself no matter how you listen to it. Unexpectedly, the master suddenly held the mask in front of him and said, "Only for 19,888. When this was said, Zhang Explode's eyes instantly cleared up. The master was confused and once again held the mask in front of the disciple's eyes, but Zhang Explode remained indifferent. After holding back for a while, Zhang Explode somewhat obediently said, "I don't have money." So, his master promptly took back the treasure. And this scene also did not escape the eyes of Xiaoyi and the others. They all seemed somewhat accustomed to it. And the aloof uncle summoned a raven, had it smell the gold nugget in his hand, and then looked toward Xiaoyi. He wanted to confirm whether what the black boss said was trustworthy. Xiaoyi hesitated and made a sound of agreement, because intuitively he felt that the person would not deceive him. At that time, the black boss told him the origin of the coffin. He said that the coffin was purchased from a local person more than 10 years ago. When the coffin was just dug up, he thought it was an antique and bought it to resell at a high price in the future. However, he had no way of knowing that there was a little boy inside the coffin. So, when he opened the coffin for the first time, he lost many brothers. Xiaoyi was puzzled as soon as he heard it. Clearly, there was a lesson to be learned from past mistakes. Why did you still decide to open the coffin again? The leader suddenly lowered his head and took a while to answer. I just want to open it and see how well the child has been preserved. He's lying. Xiaoyi saw through it at a glance. But the leader of the Black Mafia threw out an even more shocking piece of news in order to divert attention. He said that there was actually more than just one coffin unearthed that day. If he remembers correctly, there should be at least 2 to 3 identical red coffins. Upon hearing this, Xiaoyi immediately became serious. He pursued with a question. What kind of people are the ones selling coffins to you? He suddenly asked this question, which startled Black Boss. He was so frightened that he said he couldn't remember anymore. His only impression now is that the person seemed to be a village chief, and that village seemed to be called Yellow White Village. Upon hearing the name, Yellow White Village, the aloof middle-aged man was also taken aback. Xiaoyi nodded. He said he had already asked Gong Ling to investigate this village. But unfortunately, there is almost no information about Yellow White Village online. It seems like someone doesn't want the outside world to know about this village. Upon hearing this, the aloof uncle silently let the crow go, then turned to stare at the gold coins in his hand with a pensive look. The so-called yellow wit refers to ancient Taoist alchemy, the sacred art of refining elixirs and transmuting base materials into gold and silver. And now various signs have linked the two characters of yellow-white together, so there must be something wrong with this Yellow-White Village. Xiaoyi smiled when he heard this, and said he would investigate. But the aloof middle-aged man stopped him, because he wanted to find out more. Xiaoyi was wondering how to deal with Zhang Explode. Xiaoyi was taken aback when he heard this. Meanwhile, on Zhang Explode's side, He can be said to have used all his tricks, only to ask his master to temporarily lend him the face mask. Even if I have to work for food in the future, it's fine. Hearing this, the master, who was originally unhappy, seemed to be somewhat moved. Coincidentally, the telephone rang in the distance. So, under the master's command, Zhang Explode increased a bit and burst out. However, just as he picked up the phone, the voice inside suddenly startled him. Because what came through was a woman's cry for help, accompanied by some extremely eerie and bizarre sounds. Shortly after, Xiao Yi rushed over upon hearing the sound. He patted Zhang Explode on the shoulder, and then took the phone. Just a few words. Xiao Yi quickly confirmed the next place to go with just a few words. He stared at Zhang Explode and said, "There's work to be done." But if he goes on this mission by himself, what about Yellow White Village? He thought of this. He looked at the third brother lying on the ground in the distance. He suddenly had an idea. So he blurted out the nickname. The third brother. The eighth. At that moment, a graceful figure suddenly flashed in front of him. It turned out to be Gong Ling who had arrived. She straightforwardly said, "I'll go." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi was somewhat worried. After all, it seemed like Gong Ling had not rested for long. Would there be a problem if she pushed herself so hard? Gong Ling knew what he was worried about and simply said a sentence. This time she was just going to collect intelligence. Alright then. Xiao Yi didn't persuade her anymore and just reminded her to stay in touch. Meanwhile, Zhang Explode was still staring blankly at the promotional poster stuck on the door, unable to believe if the content written on it was really something these guys could do. Xiao Yi once again pointedly shouted loudly, instructing Zhang Explode to get ready to set off. And his chief master stood up appropriately, just like last time, yawning and saying he needed to take a nap. But this time, Xiao Yi didn't indulge him and instead called out, "The eighth," again. However, after calling out, Xiao Yi suddenly looked towards Zhang Explode. He said somewhat regretfully, "What a pity, little Explode. I'm afraid you won't have the chance to witness the strongest Chu Wu of our Lisong temple." "The strongest Chu Wu? Just how powerful is it?" Zhang Explode asked curiously. But in the next moment, he suddenly found a big foot wearing clogs appear in front of him. It turns out that the most powerful Chu Wu in Xiao Yi's mouth refers to his master. Upon arriving at the destination, Master showed a look of admiration on his face and said that he still needed to personally step in. He only remembered to ask, "What is the mission for today?" after getting off the car. He had long been accustomed to this. Xiao Yi smiled at the words and looked at the old building in front of him. He said that this family had long been plagued by evil thing, especially the daughter in the family, who had suffered greatly from it. So, their purpose for this trip goes without saying. Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode's chief master suddenly understood. With a confident expression, he said to Lu Explode, "Today, let me show you my skills." Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode seemed to have resigned himself to it. He even considerately reminded the master to just call him Little Yellow in the future. However, they had just prepared to set off when Xiao Yi discovered. Suddenly, a figure with a strong immortal aura appeared behind him. The person was dressed in tattered clothes and turned out to be an old Daoist in his 50s or 60s. When the old Daoist walked up to them, he only said one sentence. "Are you all colleagues?" This is a story about evil spirits. It's an old residential community. A young mother is anxiously keeping watch by her daughter's bedside, using a piece of gold to wipe her arms. Just then, the brazier placed in the middle of the hall suddenly started to stir. Seeing the situation was not good, the anxious mother hurriedly got up to check, but she did not expect that she had only taken a few steps. Behind her, there came the sound of babbling. Turning around again, she found her daughter, who had been lying on the bed, suddenly floating up in an extremely eerie posture. Episode 12, Shang Harm. So she called Lisong Temple. Soon after, there was a knock on the door, and when she opened it, she found the visitor was a bearded and scruffy old Daoist, exuding a subtle aura of authority without anger. The old Daoist immediately revealed his identity, saying that he was the celestial master Ma Dijin from Mount Zhongnan. This brief introduction was quite impressive. The hostess quickly invited him inside. Of course, she also noticed the three young people following Celestial Master Ma. The eighth took a big step forward, seeming to plan an introduction of himself. But the mother was clearly quicker. She asked if they were disciples of Celestial Master Ma. The eighth immediately became unhappy upon hearing that. He was about to explain, but Xiao Yi cheerfully stepped forward and said that they were just there to help. So, they were politely invited into the house. The room has good lighting, is well ventilated, and is spotlessly clean inside. This naturally brings joy and relaxation to those who see it. However, when they saw the girl in the inner room, their expressions suddenly became serious. The mother introduced several people, saying that this was her daughter, named Small Ka. She has been in poor health since she was young and has seen many doctors as a result. Even so, the daughter's health continues to deteriorate. So later, she tried to seek out a few masters. Those masters all said, after seeing her, that their daughters were being entangled by filthy things, and it was a very vicious kind. But even though they said so, not a single one of them could offer a solution. But she couldn't bear to see her daughter like this, with a high fever for days, and still unconscious. There's no other way. She contacted some more experts today, and wants to give it another try. At this moment, Celestial Master Ma spoke up. He said, judging from the girl's pulse, it seems that the evil object has probably penetrated deep into her internal organs. Hearing this, the mother panicked because at this moment, she was most afraid of hearing anything about it being in the advanced stages. Fortunately, Celestial Master Ma calmly reassured her, saying that he would take care of these things properly. Taking advantage of the opportunity, while the two were talking, Xiao Yi quietly touched the girl's temple. As a trace of blue light flashed by, the girl suddenly unconsciously shouted, "Mom!" Mom was startled and hurried to her daughter's bedside, asking with concern. Looking at the unfortunate mother and daughter, Xiao Yi sighed inwardly, then quietly told the third brother what she had learned. That is, this girl was indeed possessed. And that thing is still in this house. Although Zhang Explode did not hear these, he was still worried about the girl's situation. He did not understand why Shang had to disturb this girl. Upon seeing Zhang Explode transform back into the curious baby, Xiao Yi suddenly smiled and said, "People with heavy negative energy will naturally attract Shang. Besides, this girl has been weak and sickly for years, so she will naturally attract Shang. They will take advantage of her weakness and possess her." Upon hearing the term possession, Zhang Explode was somewhat surprised. He hadn't expected that this kind of thing, which he had only heard of in folklore, actually existed. Upon seeing this, Xiao Yi simply took the opportunity to explain it to him in more detail. He said that Shang is actually a kind of thought that occurs after one's death. In the beginning, they actually have no physical form. So these, Shang, rely on human bodies to achieve more concrete purposes after possessing them. For example, harming people's lives. Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode was shocked. He didn't understand why Shang would harm people if one dies. So be it. Why cause trouble for others? Xiao Yi shook his head. He said not everyone is inherently good, and many deceased individuals also have lingering attachments. And these resentments and grudges are the cause of their harm to others. So most of those who return to this world as spirits are filled with malice. However, spirits also require energy and need to feed just like humans. And humans happen to have the food they need, so they attach themselves to humans, and will also consume the victim's vitality until the person's energy is depleted. But this does not mean the end, because they will seek out new targets. Upon learning this, Zhang Explode became worried once again. He wants to know how to help the girl escape from the clutches. But Xiao Yi smiled and said, "Wait until it's dark, because these Shangs fear sunlight. Once they are exposed to the sun, they will quickly perish. Therefore, during the day, these Shangs hide in the dark until night comes to search for food. However, although there are places in the room where the sunlight cannot reach, Xiao Yi also does not want to force it out prematurely, because he wants to know why this Shang keeps disturbing this little girl. But it's still some time before dark, we can't just do nothing, right?" Seeing Zhang Explode looking eager, Xiao Yi was startled. Then he remembered that Zhang Explode was already the third brother's apprentice. In other words, he was considered from the same sect. Thinking of this, he instructed Zhang Explode to find some things with heavy yin energy for him to see, because those objects could also attract Shang. So Zhang Explode enthusiastically started working. When Zhang Explode left, he immediately looked at the memorial photo hanging on the wall. At this moment, the movement in the inner room caught Xiao Yi's attention, as he saw the mother wiping her daughter's arms with a shiny gold object. Shocked, Xiao Yi quickly walked up and asked her what she was doing. The mother looked puzzled and said she was driving away evil spirits for her daughter. Xiao Yi was a little confused when he heard this. "Are you driving away evil spirits? What are you holding in your hand?" This made the mother unable to understand. Doesn't he see that this is a piece of gold? And Xiao Yi was stunned at the moment, because he felt like he had discovered a crucial clue. At that time, he and his eldest brother had analyzed the gold nuggets found in the boy's belly, even suspecting at one point that these gold pieces were the same ones used by their predecessors 300 years ago to suppress the evil spirits and demons. But this was ultimately just a speculation at that time, as they did not find any connection between the gold and the Shangman in any ancient texts. Are there still some little-known Shang suppression secrets in this world? At this point, Xiao Yi couldn't help but ask, "Madam, where did you hear that gold can be used to ward off evil?" Unexpectedly, the mother casually said, "In their area, there has always been a belief that rubbing the body with gold can ward off evil spirits." But as she spoke, she seemed to suddenly realize something, as this young man kept mentioning gold throughout his words, implying that he might have had an ulterior motive. So she quickly said that as long as they could cure her daughter, the gold would be a token of gratitude. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yi felt embarrassed and quickly waved his hands, explaining that this was not his intention. But just at that moment, the hall suddenly rang with old Daoist scolding. It turned out that Zhang Explode, who was busy working, accidentally tripped over the incline set by old Daoist, which naturally led to a rebuke from Celestial Master Ma. Zhang Explode was startled and stood there dumbfounded, not knowing what to do. As a result, the task of apologizing and resolving the situation fell on Xiao Yi. But the third brother was a bit unkind. Seeing his apprentice being bullied, he directly comforted and consoled him with compassion. What's even more infuriating is that those two guys were acting as if nothing had happened, walking away casually with their arms around each other's shoulders. One of them even walked on a few inclines and left. Xiao Yi didn't even have to turn his body before offering a sincere apology again. Seeing this situation, the frustrated Celestial Master Ma was helpless, and could only angrily scold a few words before hurrying off to attend to other matters. It's not even dark yet, but several crows have flown onto the trees outside. I wonder if they belong to the eldest brother. And Zhang Explode continues to patrol the room carefully. At this moment, he has arrived in the kitchen. But as soon as he opened the cabinet door, he felt a dark shadow suddenly dart out. In his horror, he quickly got up to take a look, but found nothing at all. However, he saw Celestial Master Ma vigorously shaking the bell while speaking emphatically. It sounded somewhat like an unfamiliar nursery rhyme. He even seemed to faintly hear words like 5 consecutive whips coming from inside. Here, the third brother, with a disdainful expression, quietly signaled to Xiao Yi, saying, "This old Daoist is not very capable." Xiao Yi smiled, showing that he didn't mind at all, because he could tell that this old Daoist was actually a nice person, and was indeed earnestly helping. But strangely, after the old Daoist uttered the words, "Vengeful spirits after death," his voice suddenly began to tremble. And at this moment, Zhang Explode obviously still had no clue, because somehow he suddenly had a relapse of his former professional illness. He unconsciously started fixing the faucet for others. When he came to his senses, the bell of old Daoist was already ringing chaotically. Suddenly he felt something was wrong behind him, but before he could even turn his head, a strange force struck him violently. Zhang Explode was caught off guard, and his forehead was instantly marked with a bloodstain. He was even knocked down to the ground along with his body. When he struggled to get up, strange cries rang in his ears. Only then did he see that Celestial Master Ma was standing in front of him, holding a bell and telling him to get out of the way. However, just at that moment, a pair of large hands suddenly appeared and directly pressed down on old Daoist's head. In an instant, a blue light appeared, causing old Daoist to tremble as if he had been electrocuted. A horrifying dark shadow escaped from his body a moment later. At that moment, Zhang Explode seemed to have seen the appearance of that dark shadow. Old Daoist fell to the ground with a thud. Xiao Yi was still in a posture as if to help someone, looking apologetic, and said, "Oh, why didn't I catch it?" And Zhang Explode's chief master seemed a bit angry, whether it was because his disciple was hurt and he wanted to defend him, or he was angry at Shang being too bold. "The sky isn't even dark yet he dares to come out. Looks like this grudge is quite significant." Xiao Yi laughed in agreement. He inquired about Zhang Explode's injuries, and after learning that they were not serious, he asked another question. "Have you seen who just attacked you?" Zhang Explode nodded in a daze. Then, he couldn't help but look at the photo hanging on the wall. "Is it her?" Pay attention. This old Daoist claims to be Zhongnan Celestial Master Ma Dezhen. In order to help drive away evil spirits from a household, he set up inclined divination blocks in the room and performed a ritual dance. However, before old Daoist could even act, he was punished by an old grandmother who had passed away years ago. But what's strange is that instead of bothering old Daoist, the old grandmother took advantage of his body and suddenly appeared in front of Zhang Explode, who was concentrating on repairing the water pipes, and unexpectedly gave him a sudden blow. This won't do. Xiao Yi, who was sitting on the side, immediately refused to go along with it. He directly grabbed old Daoist's head, and with a series of crackling sounds, he forced the old lady out. Afterward, when Xiao Yi asked Zhang Explode if he saw the appearance of that shadow clearly, Zhang Explode couldn't help but look at the photo hanging on the wall. At this sight, everyone immediately understood. Of course, the noise just now naturally caught the attention of the mother. However, when she came out, the living room was already quiet and peaceful. Xiao Yi did not mention anything about what just happened. Instead, he asked the mother about the picture on the wall. The mother was somewhat surprised but still spoke about it. She said that was her mother-in-law, Small Ka's grandmother. As soon as Zhang Explode heard this, several people were stunned. No, this old lady must be crazy to actually harm her own granddaughter. Seeing everyone's strange expressions, the puzzled mother asked Xiao Yi why he brought this up. After all, the old person had passed away many years ago. Xiao Yi did not want to disclose the reason, so he changed the subject and started inquiring about the woman's husband. Upon hearing this, the mother suddenly fell silent. After a long while, she finally said with a face full of resentment, "That scoundrel owes a lot of debts and hasn't come back for many years." And his mother-in-law, who was driven away by him, even in her final moment, he didn't come back to take one last look. Upon hearing this, the mood of several individuals became somewhat heavy, but they didn't notice that there was a sudden change with the ancestral portrait hanging in the main hall. They saw that the originally black and white photo suddenly had a blue light shimmering in the eyes of the old grandmother, and even the glass of the frame began to crack slowly. Chapter 13, Ideation. But just at that moment, the suddenly awakened old Daoist startled them. At this moment, The old Daoist was touching his head with a dazed expression. After pondering for a moment, he suddenly looked serious and asked the others if he had just been possessed by something dirty. Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode and the other two subconsciously nodded, while old Daoist remained silent. Suddenly, he leaped up like a monkey, shouting angrily, "This is outrageous! How dare you disrespect me, Zhongnan Celestial Master! Today, old Daoist will make sure your soul scatters." He then tore open his clothes, smeared the blood from his bitten finger on his forehead, and drew a large blood talisman. Then a familiar scene appeared. Xiao Yi frowned as he felt like he had seen this thing somewhere before. Zhang Explode's chief master was even more straightforward, asserting directly that this old Daoist was not from the same profession. But what's strange is, as the old Daoist balanced himself with both hands and feet in a strange posture, suddenly a thunderous sound rang outside the house. In an instant, a strange atmosphere began to spread, and the mother looked even more worriedly at her daughter inside the house. However, as the second thunderclap sounded, everyone was horrified to discover that several dark shadows suddenly darted out from behind the old Daoist. Some even emerged from the surrounding walls. How come so many suddenly popped out? Shang was shocked and horrified. This feeling is very unsettling. It made him unable to help but think of the scene where he was once surrounded by a group of monsters yelling to open the door. Thinking of this, a wave of nausea surged up. Fortunately, Zhang Explode, who woke up in shock, covered his mouth. This abnormal situation naturally sparked Xiao Ye's concern. Seeing Xiao Ye's gaze, Zhang Explode felt guilty and remorseful, apologizing with a "sorry," because he felt that these injuries might have been caused by himself. Ke Liao suddenly laughed, and Master even directly pointed out, "Don't be self-righteous. These guys just came in to take shelter from the rain." However, when the disciple is in trouble, how can the master sit back and do nothing? He shouted, "Sun Explode," and then took out the mask of ancient coins. Seeing this, Zhang Explode's face immediately turned red. He no longer cared about the master always calling the wrong name, but was deeply touched beyond words. He even hesitated and asked, "Do you really want to give this treasure to me?" However, the next words from the master made him go dark. "The rent for the mask is 100 each time." Seeing the two of them in this appearance, Xiao Yi suddenly smiled with relief. But it's not a time for joking now, as those Shang have already come over. As for that old Daoist, he was naturally hit again. I saw him twisting his body while babbling and shouting something like, "Traitors deserve to die." His second performance directly left the few people in front of him speechless. But I don't know if they noticed the gradually spreading cracks on the old lady's photo frame. But at that moment, a sudden cry came from the inner room. Just then, Small Ka, that little maid, once again terrifyingly flew up. Even the shadow of Shang appeared behind the mother. Xiao Yi, who rushed over, didn't say a word and directly struck up with a palm. In an instant, the head of Shang was split in half, and the mother also fell unconscious on the ground. Xiao Yi then greeted the several Shangs on the bed. He didn't do anything else, he just advised these guys to practice goodness, and not to do evil. He started to form Madra with thunderous power in his hands, but before those Shang could react, on the side, a change occurred, and even Xiao Yi was stunned by this unexpected turn of events. As for the main hall, things are much simpler over here. Seeing Master Old Daoist Zhang Explode rushing over, his master directly slapped him across the face. So the poor old Daoist spun his body and flew out. Although the old Daoist was agile, he still managed to stabilize his body with a leap. But this did not pique the interest of the master. Instead, he signaled for Zhang Explode to watch carefully, as if he was going to give an on-site teaching. At this moment, the old Daoist pounced again. Of course, he still flicked out a slap just like before. But he added a sentence, saying that using this method to deal with a Shang attached to someone is totally useless. And the real weakness is right here, he said, as he picked up the backbreaker 3000 and stabbed towards old Daoist's temple. This blow indeed worked. Old Daoist rolled his eyes and fell down directly. Meanwhile, a Shang howled and floated out. The master did not even look and directly swung his hand for a strike. He immediately dealt with this troublemaker on the spot. Zhang Explode was also stunned by this thunderous move. At this moment, the master did not take action again, but coldly stared at the other black figures in the room, disdainfully saying, "Get lost, all of you." In the blink of an eye, those Shang all disappeared without a trace. Looking at the room, which had once again returned to calm, the expression in Zhang Explode's eyes was full of admiration for his master. Then they came to the inner room, where Xiao Yi stood quietly without saying a word. And the mother also woke up. At this moment, she was shouting Small Ca's name. Watching her daughter's face gradually turning red, the mother's heart was a bit excited. Zhang Explode asked in confusion, "How is she doing?" Xiao Yi grinned and said, "No problem." As soon as the words fell, the girl suddenly opened her eyes and called out, "Mom." Seeing this scene, Zhang Explode couldn't help but feel happy. However, the girl suddenly said that she dreamed of her grandma after waking up. Upon hearing this, Zhang Explode's expression immediately darkened. Because only they knew about the matter of this girl being possessed, it is feared that it is intricately connected to her grandmother. However, the girl suddenly smiled and said, "I dreamt that my grandmother came to rescue me." As soon as these words came out, Zhang Explode was instantly stunned. How could this be? Shouldn't it be Small Ca's grandmother who has been harassing her all along? Actually, even Xiao Yi thought so before. But it wasn't until he yelled at those Shang that he realized what the girl's grandmother had actually done. At that moment, he seemed to have understood something. That is, Shang is just a kind of thought, and thoughts can be good or evil. After all, they were once human too. These Shang return with all kinds of thoughts, perhaps out of longing or perhaps to protect. And some just want to come back to take another look at this world where they once lived. But without exception, they cannot avoid a door, which is Shangman. So from that time,